Good morning, everyone. Today is the last free class that we're making available for those who are on the trial version. And if you want to register, just send me a WhatsApp message so that I can send you the registration form. And I'll also send you a link to the information, because remember, the information regarding the modules is also on our website as well, all the description of the different packages that we offer as well. So today, our agenda for Rsk4803 is to go through study unit 1.6, and then we move on to study unit 2.1 of the curriculum as well. So we need to make sure that when we're done with this class, we would have done those two study sections of the study units as well. So when it comes to from the previous class that we did, we were looking at study unit 1.1 to unit 1.5. And remember, we said with unit 1.1 to unit 1.5, the idea behind those units is to look at lessons learned when it comes to risk management failures, right? So the idea is to look at lessons learned when it comes to risk management failures. And remember, in study unit 1.5, they also give us the case study of LTCM to try to explain and how to identify cases where we can say, in this particular case, this is where we can say risk management has failed. And remember, there's those 5 line items that we need to make sure that we take into account for one to be able to come up with a conclusion to say, this is where we can say risk management has failed. And remember, those line items are very much linked to the duties and responsibilities of the risk manager. So which means from unit 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, those are the case studies that where they discuss cases regarding those different companies and also how it links to risk management. And then unit 1.6, 1.5, this is where now they discuss LTCM, and in explaining or discussing LTCM as well, we go on to look at those 5 points that you need to take into account for you to say, this is where we can blame risk management, where there are, if in this case, in those cases where there were large losses as well. So which means just because a company has suffered a large loss does not necessarily mean that risk management has failed. There has to be, you need to make sure that you're able to identify those points from the from risk management failure, which are the ones that can result in risk management failures as well. Now, unit 1.6, we are now looking at the acronym VUCA. So for unit 1.6, we are now looking at the acronym VUCA. The idea behind the acronym VUCA is that it originated from the US military, where they're basically saying that during the time when they are having during the war, the top personnel in the military, in this case the army commanders, they are making real-time decisions. But as they are making real-time decisions, there are so many factors that they are also having to take into account as well. So in this case, it means that after taking that into account, this is where we now realize that this is where we realize the acronym VUCA, which basically tries to explain real-time decision-making for managers. So the acronym VUCA is basically trying to look at the factors that needs to be taken into account when you look at real-time decision-making for managers as well. So when it comes to unit 1.6, they say the article that we need to look at is what a difference a word makes, understanding threats to performance in a VUCA world. And here, under self-assessment, they say that we need to be able to explain the acronym VUCA and illustrate with examples from your own enterprise as well. Then they also say discuss complexity in the context of this article and draw comparison with the 7 billion write down in Woolworth Limited with the subsidiary in Australia. Now, when it comes to this, remember what I told you when we're looking at unit 1.1 to unit 1.5. What you should expect that in the exam, if they are going to be referring to any case study, they are going to give you the case information regarding the case study. And then after giving you the information regarding the case study, they'll ask you a question now related to that. So which means that you don't necessarily need to know of the no information regarding the case study off by heart. They will give you the information regarding the case study in the exam. Then from there, it's either they are going to be asking you to discuss the 5 points when it comes to risk management failures, or they ask you to discuss the acronym VUCA and how it relates to a particular case study as well. But remember, they will have to give you the case study so that from the case study, you are going to be now identifying how the VUCA acronym in this case is going to be related to the particular case study. So you don't necessarily need to know of the case studies by heart. That's why you see, even when it comes to the ESCOM case study as well, you'll see that if ever they're going to be bringing that question in the exam related to ESCOM, they are going to give you information in the case study. And then from the information in the case study, they will now ask you to analyze it. Where if it's in the context of risk management failures, you are now going to be able to identify the 5 points from the risk management failures in the particular case study that will be given in the exam. So please note, you don't necessarily need to know the case studies off by heart. But what you need to know is the concept behind it. If it's risk management failures, how to identify risk management failures, understand the concept and what you need to look out for. In this case, if it's going to be the VUCA acronym, understand the concept, and then from there know exactly how to apply it. Because if you look at once we're done discussing each, I'll just do a quick reference on where it was asked as well when you look at past question papers and how it was asked as well, so that you're able to see exactly how it was asked and how you can also expect such a question to be asked going into the future as well. So we are looking at the acronym VUCA. And when you look at the acronym VUCA, they are referring us to study unit 1.6. Now, when you look at study unit 1.6, we should look at what difference a word makes. They are referring us to they say, understanding threats to performance in a VUCA world. Now, VUCA, so if you look at this, so this is my first name and surname, and also that's my email address, as well as my cell phone number, which is 084-855-8155 as well. Now, okay, sorry. So this is my first name and surname, my email address, and my cell phone number as well. Now, going back to the concept of VUCA, VUCA describes situations. So VUCA refers to situations. So when you look at the acronym VUCA, so VUCA refers to situations which are having characteristics of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So these are the 4 situations identified by the concept. When you look at the acronym VUCA, these are the 4 situations that are identified. So they're basically saying, from a military perspective, the army commanders, when they're in battle, these are the 4 situations that they are also facing. Now, when you now take that concept and bring it into the financial world as well, you also see that in the business world, the managers of the business, or whether it's the directors of the business or the management of the business, or the in all, we can say the top management of the business, as they are running the business, they are also faced with what these four situations, where they are going to be facing these situations as they are making decisions. Because remember, we say when you look at Rsk4803, the goal of the firm is to maximize shareholders' wealth. So the goal of the firm is to maximize shareholders' wealth. So in pursuit of maximizing shareholders' wealth, these are the four situations that can describe the environment in which now the business world is operating in, which are basically volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity as well. Which means in the business world, how are managers going to be able to ensure that they are going to be maximizing shareholders' wealth, but at the same time, being able to deal with these situations as well? Because these situations are basically presenting what threats to the goal of the firm at the end of the day. Now, when you look at these, we look at, if you go back to the article, I'll go through the highlighted sections. So in section 1, where we look at living in a VUCA world, they say, of course, optimists see the edge of a company to gain if its leaders master the accompanying challenges. For example, volatility provides profit opportunity. Uncertainty is opportunity. And simplifying IT complexity is a major opportunity, and ambiguity equals opportunity as well. So 3 significant problems exist in how leaders have employed these terms. First, their use has been cavalier. That is, VUCA has become a cute, trendy way of saying unpredictable change. Though the words do have related meaning, its differences among them, it's the difference among them that are most valuable for leaders to understand. And secondly, even when pundits and leaders are sensitive to the differences in meaning, there is lack of information regarding just what it is that leaders should do in order to confront one or another of these conditions. And finally, and likely because there is a dearth of actionable advice out there, too many leaders are confronting the VUCA world by simply throwing up their hands. So which means that in this case, they are simply just going to give into the different conditions that accompanies those the acronym VUCA as well. So now they say, consider these 3 problems, and it is evident that the second and the third are not unavoidable consequences of the modern business world, but rather entirely avoidable outcomes of the first. Then, in the paragraphs that follow, we begin by pointing out the differences between the terms volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Then we discuss how to identify VUCA situations in the organizational environment and distinguish exactly which type of unpredictability is being experienced. And finally, we discuss the ways leaders need to position their companies to address these singularly. Each requires something different from the company and its leadership as well. Now, in the next section, which is section 2 of the article, we are now going to be looking at these acronyms in detail. So on the next section, which says, what do these terms mean and what do they mean for your company? We first look at volatility. And here they say, a volatile situation can be defined as one that is unstable and unpredictable. It does not necessarily involve complex structure. A critical lack of knowledge or doubt about the outcomes may result from key events. So which means in this case, when you look at a situation that is volatile, we can simply say, you know something is coming, but don't know how quickly and the magnitude in which it will happen. So that's when we describe a situation which is deemed to be volatile. So which means when you look at a situation that is described as volatile, you can see the situation coming, but what you don't know with certainty is exactly the magnitude at which it's going to affect your organization. So which means, in short here, the secret to dealing with volatility is, as with any component of VUCA, is understanding the opportunities and threats inherent in the situation. So when you look at what is currently happening in the, when you look at the world markets currently, you see that there is this issue of tariffs. And when you look at this issue of tariffs, you will see that it's basically the issue that is happening with tariffs as well is that you can see that the effects of the tariffs is coming, but what you don't know is exactly how quickly you are going to be able to be affected by the effects of the tariffs as well. Because remember, the pricing system is going to be having to be filtered in as well. And you don't know exactly how quickly it's going to be affecting given the constant start and go as well. So which means, remember they say a situation which is volatile represents opportunity for an organization to be profitable. That's why you see that when you look at the world markets now, especially when you look at what is happening in the US as well, you will see that there is opportunities, for example, where when you look at what is happening with the world markets now, you see that President Trump has suspended the tariffs for the next 90 days that he had proposed. And from there, you see that it's now the fight between the US and China. So which means in that case, you don't, so which means that in that case, when you look at what is happening with the world markets, initially the world markets, the world markets are when you look at what is happening with the markets as well, they fell after those announcement of the tariffs. And immediately after President Donald Trump says, well, suspending these tariffs for the next 90 days as well, the markets recovered. And though the falling of the markets also represented an opportunity for those traders who are going to be doing what we call short selling. Because remember, with short selling, you're borrowing a security from someone, selling it in the market, and then with the hope that when you buy it back after a given period of time, you're going to be buying this security at a lower price. And then your profit is going to be the difference between the price you sold it in the market when you borrowed it and the price you're going to buy it back and give it to the owner of the security as well. Which means even when the markets go down, there is opportunity for traders to make money. And also, when the markets recover, there is also an opportunity for traders to make money where you look at those traders who wants to buy low and sell high. So which means a situation that is defined as volatile represents opportunity for an organization to make profits. So they also go on to say, when volatile change is expected, the best way to prepare is to devote resources towards developing agility. So the organization needs to be able to have enough resources to keep up with these random swings in the market. So that's what they're saying. So which means the organization needs to be able to build up resources to keep up with these swings in the market. If it means that they need to buy, if they are saying that, for example, they are going to be constantly importing certain goods as well, if it means that they're going to be importing the goods early so that they don't have to be affected by these constant swings as they are operating as well, then it means that they're going to be, that's how they can be able to keep up with those changes as well. So are we on the same page when it comes to the first acronym, which is volatility? So on table 1, they discuss the first acronym, which is volatility. They are basically summarizing what we've seen so far. So which means with volatility, when it comes to the question, what it is, a relatively unstable change, information is available and the situation is understandable, but change is frequent and sometimes unpredictable. So they also give an example in this case where they say a commodity pricing is often quite volatile. Like, for example, jet fuel costs, for instance, have been quite volatile in the 21st century. And then how to effectively address it. And yet they say agility is key to coping with volatility. Resources should be aggressively directed towards building slack and creating potential for future flexibility. So are there any questions regarding the first acronym? Just give me 1 second. Are there any questions regarding the first acronym? Any questions? Yes.
Could an example of volatility be?
I didn't quite get you.
A change in interest rates? Could it be an example of it? Hello?
Yes. Yeah, you're saying?
A change in interest rates? Could it be an example of volatility?
Yeah, but is it usually when it comes to the change in interest rates, the central bank usually tries as much as possible to create a stable market. So that's why you see that in most cases they try to make the markets anticipate those changes as well. So which means usually when it comes to the change in interest rates, yeah, sometimes you don't necessarily know exactly whether they're going to be changing it by a certain amount or by a certain amount, but in most cases, the central bank try to make the change in interest rates very stable. It's not like they're going to be waking up today and say, we're just going to charge you, increase the interest by maybe 5%, whatever it is as well, which means I would be very wary of referring to the change in interest rates as creating volatility. Reason being, the central bank, because the central bank, one of their main aim is to make sure that the market is stable. The market is predictable, is in a way. They try to make these changes not too random. Like, for example, today they just changed by so much, and the next day they're going to be changing. That's why you see that even when it comes to the change in interest rates, they don't just do it randomly. On certain periods, that's when they change the interest rates as well. So I would be very wary of using the changing interest rates as something that creates volatility in the market, because the central bank always try to avoid volatile situations in the market, which means that when they announce changes in interest rates, they try to make those changes in a situation where it's not necessarily going to be disrupting the flow in the market as well. Are we together? Are there other questions? So we can move on to the next acronym. All right. The next acronym looks at uncertainty. And here they say, uncertainty is a term used to describe a situation characterized by the lack of knowledge, not as to the cause and effect, but rather pertaining to whether a certain event is significant enough to constitute a meaningful cause. Uncertainty is not volatility. A volatile situation is one in which change is likely, but the change may come quickly and at varying magnitudes. An uncertain situation, on the other hand, is not so volatile. In fact, there may be no change inherent in it at all. Because uncertainty exists in the lack of adequate information, addressing it simply involves obtaining information. Investment here entails methods of collecting, interpreting, and sharing information. So uncertainty can be solved by structurally by devoting more resources to boundary spanning activities, moving beyond existing networks, data sources, and analysis processes to gather information from new partners and look at it differently. Information networks are created from many different sources, both inside and outside the firm. So the principle is well illustrated by the aftermath of the 2001 US terror attacks. So in this case, that's why you see that to avoid a situation where which is uncertainty, where we're saying that we don't really know the magnitude of the we don't really know to say if this event going to be causing any significant changes to the system. So what is going to be the impact of this particular event? Like, for example, they give an example of a situation of when you look at terrorist activities as well, you find that it's very difficult to know exactly what is going to be the effect of terrorism when it comes to the on the day-to-day running of the organization as well. So which means that's why you see that when you look at it from a countrywide perspective, like what happened during the 2000, when you look at the effect of the 2001 terror attacks as well, you find that the US started coordinating more with the other Western countries. Like, for example, you look at the national the NSA combining with the MI6, which is the British one, and other countries, like, for example, the Israel and the French and the French intelligence as well, just to gather as much information as possible. Because the more information you gather, the more you're able to now have more understanding of exactly what really are the activities of the potential terrorist cells within your countries as well. So here they say, to again reinforce distinction between the different components of VUCA, we note that the post 9/11 situation was not necessarily volatile. The core issue facing the world's governments was not a lack of stability or predictability, but rather government leaders realized that the success of the attacks on the World Trade Center might encourage other terrorists to create similar plots as well. So which means when you look at the issue of uncertainty on table 1, where you look at discussion of uncertainty, they say what it is, uncertainty is a lack of knowledge as to whether an event will have meaningful ramifications. So the cause and effect are understood, but it is unknown if an event will create significant change. So anti-terrorism, as an example, initiatives are generally plagued with uncertainty. We understand many cases of terrorism, but not exactly when and how they could spare the attacks. So to deal with the situation of uncertainty, the key word there is information gathering. So information is critical to reducing uncertainty. So firms should move beyond existing information sources to both gather new data and consider it from new perspective. So when you look at it from a firm's perspective, when it comes to uncertainty, this is where, for example, you have an organization that has its primary product that it's producing, but then they go on to decide to say, maybe why don't we consider introducing another market that we can also enter into as well. So for example, you find that, let's say, for example, you have a hotel that you're running, but then you realize that as you're running this hotel, you might there is also going to why don't you introduce a shuttle service? And this shuttle service is basically going to be servicing your clients as well. So which means now you have a new market that you're trying to enter into, which is basically a new business that you're trying to enter into, which is the shuttle service. But now the uncertainty now is going to be, so if we introduce the shuttle service, how successful can it be? Is it going to be successful? Because remember, there are other operators who are operating within that space as well. We have the cabs, which have traditionally operated. We have Uber and Bolt, which is also operating in that particular space as well. So which means at the end of the day, which means that if we introduce this particular shuttle service as well, specifically meant for our clients, is it necessarily going to be a success? Our clients going to be choosing our shuttle service, or they're going to be continuing with Uber, with Bolt, or any other shuttle service that they might prefer to utilize as well. So this is where the uncertainty is as well. So which means to deal with uncertainty, that's why you see that before you even introduce the shuttle service, you need to go and do market research. As you're doing market research, you're gathering more and more information so that you're able to now understand the effect of what you are trying to introduce as well. Are we on the same page when it comes to uncertainty? Any questions? All right. We move on to the next acronym, which is complexity. Now, when you look at complexity, they say a complex situation is characterized by many interconnected parts. Again, this is distinct from volatile or uncertain situation. And then they go on to say, instead, the most straightforward way for an organization to address complexity is to simplify the situation by adopting a structure that mirrors that of the environment. Research has consistently shown organizations that adapt themselves to match environmental change perform at substantively higher levels, whereas the firms that maintain past structures and processes in the face of the changing business environment are less effective. In the most obvious example, As a small or informal organization grows, it is expected that formal departments will appear to address what has become too much of a single person to handle. So finance, operations, marketing, and human resources functions are established so that each part of the organization addresses something in which it has expertise. Um, when you look at the example that they discuss, his firm's grows into many new markets, creates a complexity that might best be resolved by moving to a more geographically based organizational structure, such that the different branches of the company are able to specialize in understanding and exploiting market regulations and idiosyncrasies. So when you look at a situation that is deemed to be complex, this is where, in the simplest example, you have an organization or you have a company that you start off, maybe let's say, for example, you open your company, you start operations in Gauteng, but then you realize that there is also a market that you are able to, there's also constant demand that you're experiencing in, let's say, for example, in KZN. So which means you now decide to open a branch in KZN. So which basically means that as your company is growing as well, it basically means that you are going to be needing the same manager who's managing your organization, who has been managing your organization in Gauteng, cannot also be expected to be the same manager who's going to be managing the operations in what? In KZN, because maybe they might end up what? Feeling overwhelmed and being unfamiliar with how things work in KZN. And as an example as well, maybe if the company is growing, they might end up saying, we have been exporting quite a lot of goods in Botswana. So it means that we are seeing that there's a market for our product in Botswana. Why don't we open a branch in Botswana? Which means instead of having a manager now managing the operations directly from Gauteng, where they're managing the operations in Botswana, why not now have a manager who's going to be managing the operations in Botswana? So which means they're basically saying, as the organization is growing, it's becoming more and more complex. Why? Because there are so many ways of working, different cultures, so many factors that you have to take into account that a single manager from their own space might not be able to process and comprehend as well. So because of this, that's why you see that as the organization is growing, there's more need so to deal with the situation of which is deemed to be complex. You need what? People who specialize. Like, for example, if you start your own company, initially you are the operations guy, you are the finance guy, you are the marketing guy, you are basically everything. But now, as your company is growing, you will see that at some point, all these roles are going to end up feeling very overwhelming. So which means the only and best way to deal with a situation which becomes complex is basically to break it down into specialty functions as well, where there's a function which is basically going to be specializing in a certain activity of the organization. And that way, this is how an organization is going to be able to cope with situation which is constantly becoming complex. So if you check in table 1, where they discuss complexity, they say under what complexity is, they say this is where there are many interconnected parts forming an elaborate network of information and procedures, and often multiform and convoluted, but not necessarily involving change. So as an example of a complex situation, they say moving into foreign markets is frequently complex. Doing business in new countries often involves navigating a complex web of tariffs, laws, regulations, and logistic issues. So the best way to address a situation of complexity is restructuring the internal company operations to match the external complexity is the most effective and efficient way to address it. So firms should attempt to match their own operations and processes to mirror the environmental complexities. So that's the best way to deal with a situation that is having characteristics of complexity. Are we on the same page when it comes to the next the acronym of on complexity? Any questions? The last word on the acronym is ambiguity. So when they talk about ambiguity, they say ambiguity characterizes situations where there is doubt about the nature of cause and effect relationships. So just a lack of understanding as to what will happen next. And in that lack of understanding, is distinct from uncertainty. In a merely uncertain situation, you have a good idea of what causes what. So an ambiguous situation, on the other hand, typically revolves around wholly new products, market innovation, or opportunity. So an ambiguous situation is more challenging because of the newness. There is little historical precedent for determining the outcomes of certain causes and courses of action. So in the case of ambiguity, we believe the key to success is experimentation, not slack resources, information gathering, or restructuration. So which means in this case, when it comes to an ambiguous situation, they're basically saying ambiguity is a lack of knowledge as to the basic rules of the game. The cause and effect are not understood, and there is no precedent for making predictions as to what to expect. So the transition from print to digital media has been very ambiguous. Companies are still learning how customers will access and experience data and entertainment given new technologies. So experimentation is necessary for reducing ambiguity. So only through intelligent experimentation can firm leaders determine what strategies are and are not beneficial in situations where the former rules of business no longer apply. So which means the best way to deal with a situation where you're dealing with ambiguity is experimentation, which means that you need, before you introduce a particular product, it basically means that before you introduce that particular product, you need to do a lot of experimentation so that you can see exactly how the product behaves. That's why you see that, for example, you look at the advancements in artificial intelligence. And remember, artificial intelligence can potentially be used for so many other things as well. There is potential for artificial intelligence to be used to have self-driving cars. There's potential for artificial intelligence to be used to have robots, which are going to be used in the warehouses where they're basically doing tasks, which are they're already happening now. But remember, we're talking about robots which can also reason on their own, make their own decisions, and then do the tasks in the different warehouses. Artificial intelligence can also potentially be used in so many different spheres of life, even in at some point, if you look at those movies where they're looking at the world in the future, where you can also have robots which are basically going to be doing chores around the house, in the household as well. But now the best way to actually understand exactly what is the potential that they can also produce and how they can also, what can we also have the most efficient way of utilizing them as well. That's why you see that there's constant experimentation when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence. so that we're able to now understand exactly, so how does it work, or how do we improve it, and exactly, so which means that all these can also be achieved through experimentation. So this is how we look at the acronym VUCA. So are there any questions regarding the acronym VUCA? Any questions? As a final thought from the author of the article, they say globalization has created opportunities. With one hand, it has introduced threats with the other. The stubborn global recession has blunted repeated bursts of optimism for the return to a path of prosperity. So layer on the challenge of digesting technological advancements that impact industry, as well as the consequences of demographic shifts in the workforce, and there can be little doubt that leaders have their hands full. So which means with all these changes that are happening and all these developments as well, you find that so with all these developments that are happening around the world as well, it basically means that managers are constantly having to keep up with all these changes and developments as well. Are there any questions? Any questions? Anyone lost regarding study unit 1.6? Now, if you look at how this was asked in the previous papers, if you look at how this acronym of the VUCA acronym was asked in the previous papers, they say VUCA, if you look at May, June 2023 paper, that's when it was last asked. I think it was also the first time that they asked a question regarding this acronym. If you look at historical questions from when the curriculum was introduced, which I think it was first introduced around 2016, 2017, somewhere there. So when you look at the acronym VUCA, you'll see that it was they had never asked that the question regarding the VUCA acronym before. I think this was the first time they did ask a question regarding the VUCA acronym. And when you look at the way that they are bringing this question, they say VUCA is an acronym that has recently found its way into the business lexicon. So the components it refers to are volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So the concepts have been used to describe an environment which defines confident diagnosis and befuddles executives. In a VUCA world, the conditions render useless any efforts to understand the future and to plan responses. So explain the individual components of VUCA. So which means they asked, when you look at this question, they were asking us to explain the individual components of VUCA. And when you look at ideally, Which means if you look at ideally how you would answer this question, I'll just highlight where I address this particular question when it comes to the memo to the past question paper as well. So which means you need to discuss what VUCA is and how it affects the organization. Then from there, you need to discuss each acronym, state each acronym, discuss each acronym, and also discuss how each acronym can be addressed as well. So which means in answering this question, discuss what the VUCA world is and how it pertains to a particular organization. Then from there, you need to state each acronym, discuss its effect on the organization and how it can also be addressed when it comes to how it affects the organization as well, which means you are going to be doing that for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity as well. So that's basically ideally how you would address this question regarding VUCA. So it was asked in the May-June 2023 paper. And so which means in answering this particular question, if it comes in the exam, discuss what VUCA pertains to and how, when it comes to specific to the organization. And then from there, state each acronym, discuss its effect on the organization, and also discuss how each word on each letter on the acronym can be addressed as well. So ideally, that's how you would be expected to answer this question when it comes, if it ever comes in the exam. Are there any questions regarding question unit 1.6?
Hi, Rhinos. Good morning.
Yes.
Rhinos and
Morning.
colleagues. I'm just trying to think here. When you are then given or analyzing an event or situation based on VUCA, does it have to apply to all the acronyms? Like, for instance, the example that I'm thinking now is if you can be asked maybe the impact of COVID-19, do you have to say how did it affect volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity? I don't know, like what I'm trying to say, for each case, must it touch on all the acronyms, or you can analyze a situation just on maybe saying this is volatile and ambiguous because of 1, 2, 3, not that there were no necessarily uncertainties or complexity in what happened.
All right. How it was asked before, like what I've shown you, in May, June 2023, it was the first time that they asked this question when you look at historically as well. And how it was asked here, it was just a question to discuss the VUCA acronym in general, right? Now, if ever they're going to be giving you a case study, where from the case study, they ask you to discuss the VUCA acronym as well, it means probably it will be a situation where an organization, as it is running, it's going to face this situation and face that situation, and then face that situation, and then another situation as well. So from the different situations that the organization is going to be facing, your job now is going to be identifying to say, from what they're discussing, this is probably a situation of volatility. Then you are now going to be discussing exactly how the situation of volatility is affecting the organization and how it can also be addressed pertaining to the organization. So which means my expectation is that if they're going to be asking the acronym of VUCA in a case study, it means that you have an organization that is going to be facing different situations as they're running the way the management is facing different situations as they're running the organization. And your job now is going to be saying, when it comes to this situation, I'm seeing that this is pertaining to volatility. And then when it comes to discussion of this other issue as well, regarding the organization, this is to do with uncertainty. And then when it comes to this particular situation, this is to do with what? Complexity, and then comes to this situation. So it's not necessarily going to be where you are expecting all the letters of the acronym to be relevant to that. You need to understand this particular situation that is being discussed. Can we say this is the situation that is volatile, and having uncertainty, having complexity, or having ambiguity? You need to be able to. So, because the idea is that the lecturer wants you to be able to distinguish them. And for you to be able to distinguish them, it means from a particular situation that they discuss, specifically that they discuss, the idea is this situation, can it be described as a situation that is volatile, and having uncertainties, having complexities, or having ambiguity? So the idea is for you to be able to distinguish between them. So which means from a situation that is given, you now need to identify to say, so what is it pertaining to? Are you with me?
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. So if they give you as a case study, as a case study, and then they give you different situations that the organization is dealing with, then from these different situations, that's when you now need to be able to identify to say, this particular situation, is it volatility? And then this particular situation that the organization are experiencing as well, is it uncertainty, or is it complexity, or is it ambiguity? You need to be able to identify. All right. Are we okay? Any other questions? All right. Can we take a 10 minutes break until 9:25? Can we take a 10 minutes break until 9:25? At 9:25, we move on to unit 2.1. So can we take a 10 minutes break until 9:25? Then we move on to unit 2.1.